In this video, we are going to take a closer look at Machair, what it is and why it's important. I am Helen Bibby, Conservation Consultant for SAC Consulting. Machair is a habitat only found in Scotland and Ireland and is therefore one of Europe's rarest habitats. Found along windswept coasts, it is an accumulation of shale sand and organic material. It is often associated with sand dunes. The Machair is extremely fertile vegetation, dominated by grasses and flowering herbs. It has an extremely high biodiversity value and is important for agriculture. Some of the species that rely on Machair include corncrakes, whose preferred habitat is cropped Machair. Great yellow bumblebee, which is one of our rarest bumblebees and thrives only on Machair, which is flower-rich and ungrazed during the summer months. During a recent visit to Islay, I caught up with Louise Muir from the RSPB to discuss Machairs.
So we've been on Islay today and we've had a look at some of the Machair ground. Now the Machair on Islay isn't the same really as the Machair on the Outer Isles, for example, but there still is some between the dune systems. So on behalf of the RSPB, we've got Louise Muir here today, who's going to talk a wee bit about, she's based in Ireland, she's going to talk a wee bit about the Machair on Islay. And what is it? So Louise, what is the value of this Machair for biodiversity on Islay?
I think Machair as a habitat is one of the most spectacular habitats you can have on the west coast. And on Islay, we're right on the periphery of this habitat, but it is just renowned for its diversity, and not just sort of its floristic diversity, it's the sort of invertebrates that go with that. So really important species nationally. So we've got short-necked oil beetle, great yellow bumblebee, not here on Islay, but we've got some mining bees as well. So those invertebrates sort of come hand in hand with this huge range of botanical diversity. And then on top of that, we've got our waders. They're a spectacular habitat for breeding waders as well.
Okay, so most of the Machairs here on Islay, and actually the ones we've been filming on Tiree, are grazed by farmers as well. You know, they're an integral part of the farm calendar as well. So how much does grazing add to this type of habitat?
So I guess the Machair is used by farmers and crofters throughout the summer for creating a crop, whether that's a cereal crop or a silage crop, for them to feed their stock in winter. And if they're leaving that crop over the summer, then it gives the chance for the flowers to seed, for pollinators to be there, and also really important species like corncrake. So corncrake use the Machair, the longer vegetation in the Machair, and other waders, like I said before, lapwing, oyster catchers, ring plover as well will nest in these areas, and just leaving that grazing for the summer, so having a grazing break in the summer, that nesting period, allows all of that to happen. And then in winter, you take that crop, and because of the soil structure, because it's sandy and dry, then you can use that grazing throughout the winter and put those nutrients back in from the dung. So it's really sort of a whole holistic system that works both for the farmer and crofter and the wildlife.
Okay, so you mentioned great yellow bumblebee, and I know we don't have it here on Islay, but it's more on the Outer Isles. There is some in Tiree, and I understand from Tiree that actually great yellow bumblebee is only found on those Machairs which are given a grazing break in the summer. They seem to need these really floristically diverse areas.
Definitely, and it's a range of grazing as well. So it's that sort of mosaic of different times of grazing. So you're not leaving everything all summer. So there'll be different, there'll be earlier grazing. So places will have earlier grazing breaks, and it's just having that continuation of pollen for the bees and the other insects as well.
Louise highlights how important Machairs are to many species, including birds, insects, flowers, and also humans. Machair has long been an important habitat for agriculture. To be at their best, they require grazing, although in the Outer Isles they have a long history of cropping. Next we hear from Craig Archibald of Craigan's Farm in Islay, who manages some Machair as part of his farm business. As Craig says in his discussion, Machair is an example of a habitat where biodiversity and agriculture can work together for mutual benefit.
So today we're standing at the end of Craigan's farm, and I've got Craig Archibald here who manages Craigan's farm, and we're looking at some of the Isle of Machair. Now the Isle of Machair is it's not so famous as the Machair on the outer Isles. It's a little bit different, it's not quite so floristically diverse. I don't think it has the amount of shell sand in it that is on the outer Isles. But it's still Machair, and it's still grace, and it's still valuable to the farm. So Craig, how do you grace this Machair?
Well, our Machair's different. We've got Machair ground within dune ground behind us here. You'll see the point behind us. There's flats within them dune ground that used to be worked at one time, but it's been designated for specific flower species. So now we're grazing that down during the winter, letting the flowers all go during the summer, and then we use that as deferred grazing, and we graze anywhere up to 100 cows on there during the winter.
Okay, do you graze cows and sheep on it, or just cattle?
Sheep at different times. There'll be a few sheep all the time. They always get everywhere. And then during the winter, midwinter, we'll use that to get the sheep through to lambing time. It's dry ground, a wee nibble down there, put some feed blocks, and that's what the cows have left after they've munched through the bulk of the roughage, which gets it down to being pretty bare, so that it can then grow again and the flowers come again next year.
Okay, so it's the same like quite a lot of habitats we're talking about here, that without the grazing on it, that you'd get quite a lot of rough growth. So the grazing's quite important in the winter and during the winter and back end spring, to enable to get the sward down, so that supports all the species diversity that comes onto it, which you wouldn't have without the grazing, or you wouldn't certainly have as much of it. So we can see that it's important for biodiversity. And what kind of importance is it for the farm, apart from having just some extra grazing?
Well, it's grazing that we can use during the winter to take our cows through. It's got shelter with the dunes, it's got the flats which have got grass. So that feeds the cows, shelter for my cows, takes them through the winter, ready for calving, and then towards the end it takes the cows through the last bit, ready for lambing, which it's a big importance to the farm.
Is that good? And it gives you something opposite to the saltings that we talk about in a different video, in that you've got dry ground now to put your stock on, as well as wet ground in different times of the year. So that sounds pretty good arrangement to me.
Yeah. Also, it needs stock on for. It's designated also for chuff, so it's supposed to have stock on as well for chuff, and some very rare species of bee as well, which need the cattle to disturb the ground as well. So you need disturbed ground as well as.
That'd be great yellow bumblebee probably, which is on the Machairs out on the US. It's great yellow bumblebees.
Yeah.
I think it would be probably.
Yeah, and sand burrowing bees as well.
Ah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it shows you that the sheep and cattle are actually supporting again a really good biodiversity on that area, and that's really why it's a designated site.
Yeah.
So that's great, Craig. Thank you very much for giving us that wee insight into how important Machair is for the farm. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Machair is a very fragile habitat, easily damaged by vehicles. Once the vegetation breaks, the sand underneath blows away in the wind, and erosion becomes difficult to stop. Under or overgrazing can also be a problem. Intensive grazing prevents the plants from flowering and can cause erosion. Undergrazing allows rougher grasses to dominate, outcompeting the wildflowers. The best management is light grazing by sheep or cattle, with a summer grazing break of about 4 months. In summary, don't overgraze or abuse this fragile habitat. If you can give it a summer grazing break, that's best. Managing habitats sensitively will help combat the biodiversity crisis. For more information, visit the FAS website, www.fas.scot.